Hi, it's Katya. It's my favorite time. Definition time! Today I think we should define some terms that will regularly be used on this channel and are just good for people engaging with polytheists to know. The terms are eclectic, multi-traditional, and syncretic. An eclectic pagan is a pagan which blends different aspects of different pagan traditions in no particular order. They typically do honor the gods and nature, etc., but sort of blend what just may happen to resonate, not trying to reconstruct anything specific. I don't mean this to come across as insulting by any means, but an eclectic pagan is generally more hodgepodge or miscellaneous in their praxis, as their interest doesn't lie in a particular tradition. A lot of eclectics may even opt to call themselves non-denominational, which, not to throw shade at Christians or anything, but they actually tend to mean. In other words, they generally do not feel constrained by any particular tradition, sort of going with the flow, if you will. I do not mean to shame or invalidate eclectics by saying this, nor do I think that is invalid, but if you are drawn to an eclectic route, similarly to what I would tell a mixed martial artist, I still think it's a good idea to try to understand context. Okay, so how does this differ from a multi-traditional pagan? Well, a multi-traditional pagan may engage in elements of eclecticism or syncretism, which is different still than eclectic, but more on that in a minute. But a multi-traditional pagan tries to fully embrace multiple pagan traditions, including their praxis. For example, though I am still learning and always will be, I practice heathenry, Strageria, Hellenism, and Celtic Reconstructionism. Different traditions differ in many ways, down to philosophy, ritual conductions, sometimes even understanding of the gods. Just as an example, though they seem similar at first glance, the way Hellenists understand the Olympians versus the Titans, generally speaking, is different than the way heathens tend to view the Aesir versus the Jötnar. I'm not saying whether or not they are similar or different, just that they are generally understood differently, as heathenry and Hellenism do have their differences. The way I initially understood the relationship between the Titans and the Olympians was that the Titans were the gods who were overthrown by the Olympians, but I asked some other people who were Hellenists what they thought of that understanding, and my friend Comrade gave an example I thought was worth sharing here. The way they explained it is, Titan is sort of a generational title like Gen X and Millennial. You get some deities like Hecate, who were Titans that sided with the newer generation of deities. Since Hecate sided with Zeus, she wasn't overthrown in any way. Olympian is also a difficult term because not all Olympians were born yet, and who is or isn't an Olympian can vary by time and region. They see the story of the gods versus the Titans to be a good metaphor for generational power shifts. Take AOC in America, for example. She's a millennial in a government filled with boomers and Gen Xers, but there's a clear difference in her approach to politics. A parallel they use is how Gen Z was often referred to as millennials growing up until college age, getting their own separate category. Generations aren't clear-cut, but overarching political shifts caused by these generations are pretty clear. Huge shout out to Comrade for that! Now contrast this with Jötnar, which is the plural of Jotun in Old Norse. Jötnar are generally understood to be powerful nature spirits, standing in opposition to the gods, known as the Aesir, typically seen as the principal gods in the Norse pantheon, and the gods known as the Vanir, which are gods associated with fertility, wisdom, nature, and magic. Jötnar are typically seen as opposing the gods, like I said. Though they may interact with or even marry them, Jötnar are generally speaking, with some notable exceptions, for the most part, not seen as deities themselves. So you can see the understanding, typically speaking, is quite different. I have my own opinions, but I'll let you determine yours. Now, multi-trad and eclectic are still different than syncretism, which is the blending of different traditions as opposed to picking and choosing from various traditions. Note that I said blending. This is still not quite identical with multi-trad or eclectic, though both do engage in the practice of blending from time to time. So a multi-trad pagan may be syncretic, but doesn't necessarily have to be. Voluntary syncretism is valid, especially when attempting to utilize as proper understanding as possible, but systemically forced syncretism can be problematic. We'll touch more on that in another video soon, so I'll just say for now that syncretism is valid when done voluntarily. But if your understanding of syncretism comes from UPG, that is always a good disclaimer to give people. So all that being said, who's right? Well, I'll give my honest answer. I do not speak for the gods, and it is not my place to say. I engage in multi-traditional praxis personally because I feel I get the most benefit by going that route, but what comes with that oftentimes as a side effect may be some forms of syncretism. Though I definitely don't identify as eclectic, nor do I feel my traditions are particularly syncretic, but really the only person that can decide which is right is you. How? I did a whole video on personal gnosis. Go check that out. Huge thanks to Sean, Phaedra, Comrade, Alex, and Aliakai for your input. And remember, knock 'em out.